Has Southern Miss found their quarterback? It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. I said I'd have an announcement later this week, and we will. We still are not quite ready to make that announcement, but we are in, let's say, trust the process, part of that stuff. All right, good show for you today. We got Scott Watkins on from the Sun-Herald talking Southern Miss. Will Hall apparently happy with the quarterback play from the scrimmage this past weekend. We talk about the offense. We talk about the defense. We talk about expectations, and something that I picked up in only a couple years. Southern Miss has a different kind of fan base. Other places, such as the Cajuns, such as Arkansas State, Texas, in Alabama, South Alabama, all have to put up with SEC teams, and it always bothers them in terms of attendance. Doesn't seem to affect Southern Miss. So we talk about that as well. So let's bring on Scott Watkins from the Sun-Herald talking about the quarterback race for the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Always thrilled to have our guy, Scott Watkins, on from the Sun-Herald covering Southern Miss, and he wrote a story a couple of days ago. Southern Miss offense shines during first scrimmage of spring practice. Will Hall thinking they may have found themselves a quarterback, quote unquote. We've got a chance to be pretty good at quarterback. Scott, what do you think?
Well, hey, Dave, thanks for having me back. I think that Hall is just really excited to finally have a real quarterback battle at Southern Miss, which has not been something that they've been able to do over his first two springs. Last year, the starter that started most of the games. His primary competition was a redshirt freshman who didn't really have any experience himself. So this situation, having a true freshman who has started a lot of football games now, two transfers, one from Clemson, one from Houston. There's just a lot more experience and a lot more knowledge in the room and a lot more skill in the room. And it's got Hall excited because this is the first time that a trio of legitimately talented players are actually competing against each other for the starting role at Southern Miss under Will Hall. So this is just a big spring. I personally don't think anybody has jumped out into a huge lead in the battle just yet. I think they're just kind of letting them go for a little bit. But it's something that I think is going to go into the fall. But yeah, I think Will Hall is very excited about that race.
All right, so let's back it up. You said there were two transfers. One guy transferred out, Ty Keys. He was heading to Syracuse, to my Syracuse Orange, and at the last second, he decided to go to Last Chance U. What happened there? I mean, that was the big guy, right? Will Hall was at Tulane. He got Ty Keys to go to Tulane, and then he got him to come back to Southern Miss. He's just been banged up, has not been able to get over injuries. They just decided it'd be better off for him to move on.
I don't know if there's any direct decision relating to Ty Keys. He just had an unfortunate start to his career with two season-ending injuries in his first 2 years. They just wanted more bodies in the room. They had kind of whiffed in the portal last year, and that kind of led to the situation they ended up with before this past season. So they weren't going to do that again this year. And they wanted to load up the quarterback room, and there was just kind of an idea. You just got the sense that somebody was going to leave because that did put a lot of bodies in that room, and Ty Keys ended up being the guy to leave. It's not. I wouldn't even call him unfortunate. Keys, I think being at East Mississippi is going to do him really well. Get him some playing time. Hopefully, he stays healthy, and if he can refine his game a little bit, I think I wouldn't doubt if the door is still open in Hattiesburg for a Keys return either. But he's still got his whole future ahead of him. I maybe 1 year has ticked off on his eligibility clock. Maybe I'm sure with a waiver, he could probably get that waived as well. But I think that was just the situation there.
We're talking with Scott Watkins from the Sun-Herald covering Southern Miss. It's Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. All right, so I did the Sunbelt West quarterback preview a couple of days ago, last week, when someone commented, kind of felt like Southern Miss was a lot like the Cajuns, where everyone's banged up, so one guy's getting the reps. But according to you and according to Will Hall, everyone got the reps. Was Zach Wilke banged up, earlier in spring or coming into spring, or is everyone healthy?
The only injury, I guess, would be Billy Wiles is dealing with I think just a strained oblique, maybe. I think that's what it is. I think that's what I wrote my story, but he's good enough to practice. He's just not 100%. His velocity is just a tick down right now. That is the only issue. All three are playing. They're all practicing. They all look good. Wilkie and I went to the scrimmage on Saturday, and in my eyes, Wilkie looked good, and Holman Edwards looked really, really good as well. But I think Billy Wiles is also good. He's just working through just a little strain in his oblique, and once that's passed, I think that'll really open up the competition as well.
All right, you could, name Wilkie as a roller coaster, because it was quite the season for him, starting and then coming off the bench and, saving some games. And, first play of the game against the Cajuns was an interception, and he comes back and wins that ball game. He had quite the season last year for Southern Miss. I would presume the key is that Will Hall is looking for more production and a lot less turnovers from Zach Wilke. If he's going to be the starter, he just can't turn it over as much as he did last year.
Yeah, they're looking for a lot of things at that position. Of course, that's one of it. They want somebody who can kind of open up the offense as well. They kind of seemed at times where they got a little, I won't say one-dimensional, where they were running the football over and over, but they were throwing the ball, between -5 and +5, every play. They just weren't pushing the ball downfield very often with Wilkie. And it wasn't until Trey Lowe took over for a couple games when they started pushing the ball downfield again. That's what they're looking for. They want somebody who is going to open up the offense and create the offense that Will Hall wants to see. He's an offensive coach, and they have yet to be able to do what he wants to do on offense after 2 years. So that's what they're hoping for. That's what they're developing for. That's what they're competing for. Somebody that can do more than just, be a body that stands behind the center and hands off to Frank Gore Jr. So that's what they're looking for.
Well, I mean, that sort of sounds a lot like, although he's had a couple of good quarterbacks at South Alabama, Kane Womack, this is the first time he's going in with the same quarterback 2 years in a row. I'm going to presume that South Alabama is going to be picked to win the Sun Belt, certainly the West, and maybe overall. So if Wilkie gets the gig, it's going to be 2 years in a row that someone's got experience for Will Hall playing underneath him in Hattiesburg.
Yeah, and that would be a really big plus. But he's got to win the job, and there's a whole lot of competing left. I tend personally to always lean towards the incumbent in these situations.
Correct.
But
yes,
this is a type of situation where you've seen what you've seen from Wilkie. He's going to get better, but he's got stiff competition, and it would not shock me if Billy Wiles or Holman Edwards is QB1 against Alcorn State, in September.
Yeah, to me, it's one of those things that if it's close, I'm going with a guy that I know. The other guy's got to be not exponentially better, but he's got to be significantly better, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it'll be, if they're exponentially better, you'll know that immediately to begin fall ball. He'll have a depth chart. All right, let's take a time out. We'll come back and we'll talk expectations. Golden Eagles win a bowl game last year. How can they take that to the next level in 2023? But first, let's talk a little bit about FanDuel, which I will apparently, once I make the announcement, be able to actually use, which could be good or bad in my case, but looking forward to it either way. And now is a great time to download the FanDuel app. We are at the Final Four, and it has been an amazing tournament, and you don't want to miss any of the action. It can enhance your experience if you download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net. All on the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, we talked about the offense. Let's talk about the expectations and the defense of Southern Miss in 2023 with the Sun Herald's Scott Watkins. We're talking to Scott Watkins. It is Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Southern Miss coming off a 7-6 season. Will Hall's third year. Again, he seemed to, I joke about this, calm down a little bit, dial down the intensity. I know he loves Mississippi. He loves Southern Miss, but he's going to have an aneurysm if he doesn't, keep the emotions in check. And he seemed to do a little bit. In fact, he did a lot better job last year, and he led him to a bowl win in Mobile at the Lending Tree Bowl. What do you think expectations are for Southern Miss this coming season? Because it is going to be, you got Troy, the defending champion. South Alabama is going to be good. We'll see what the Cajuns are. Texas State is going to be interesting. There's a lot of competition in the West. All of a sudden, over the last couple of years, the powers were in the East. Coastal, App, James Madison was good last year. Marshall was good. But I think the power is going to be in the West this coming season.
Yeah, I think it's they just want to improve. They just want to get better, and they want to compete for a division title. I don't think winning a division title is, the end all be all for year number 3, but they want to be in it by, week 13, week 12, week 13. They want to be right there in that race. I think that's I don't know if that'll be the expectation. We still have several months to go until even I look at what's going on around the league and try to get a feel for where Southern Miss might land. But in my very, very early thoughts, I see it as South Alabama up top, and then kind of Southern Miss and Troy sitting right underneath, being those first two competitors for the West Crown. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen. I think that's what they expect. They're no longer saying, hey, we want to make it to a bowl game. We want to win a bowl game. That's our goal this year. It is Sun Belt Conference championship from here on out. I believe would be their expectation going forward.
All right, and John Summerall ruined that for everybody because he did it in year 1. Expectations are raised everywhere. Talking to Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald covering Southern Miss. All right, so there's a lot more than just quarterback that is up for grabs. Frank Gore Jr. is back, right? But you got some other guys that they need to replace offensively.
Yeah, Jason Brownlee's the big one, the star wide receiver. I don't know if that's going to be a huge issue. What I would love to see personally is I want to see Hall take advantage of the 2 slot receivers that he has. He had Ja'Karius Caston, who's very, very good, but then Ty Mims showed up last year and was just electric. It was the first fun player that I've seen here at Southern Miss since I've been here. And having those 2 on the field at the same time could be really, really dangerous. I don't think replacing Brownlee is going to be that big of a deal. Obviously, an incredible talent, very good wide receiver. They got guys on the outside that they like. Zay Franks has had a pretty solid spring. That they're fine in that regard. I think they're good at wide receiver. I think they're pretty good at wide receiver. They've got 4 returning offensive linemen. Frank Gore Jr. They figure out this quarterback situation. This offense is in line to take a pretty big step forward next year.
And in terms of that, so what would that mean, right? We like the Marshalls and the Troys, if they're scoring like 3 touchdowns, they're going to be good. They may not win every game, but they're going to be in every game. Southern Miss has a really good defense when it does show up. So when you say they're going to be good, they're going to be scoring, 21, 24, or are they going to be able to keep up with South Alabama and put 30 points up on the board? Although I think the game in Hattiesburg last year was 20-17.
Yeah, it's just going to be kind of a different feel because last year the Sun Belt was just so defensively heavy. Everybody was so good on that side of the ball that you just didn't see. It seemed to kind of skew a lot of things. Even teams with a lot of offensive talent seem to struggle at times. I don't know what's going to happen this year. I think more points are going to be scored across the board in this league next year, and I think that Southern Miss is going to be part of the reason why. 30 points a game is not out of the realm of possibility. It's actually, I think, somewhat likely. They averaged 25 with an offense that just wouldn't move at times, And a part of that was they scored several defensive touchdowns, a special team scored too. But this year, I think the offense is going to find the end zone a lot more often.
All right. So what about, and we're talking Southern Miss football with Scott Watkins, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. What about the defense? Anybody big time need to be replaced on the Golden Eagles defense?
A lot to replace on the back end. They've got pretty much one DB returning, and then it's a lot of new faces. They jumped into the transfer portal. They got MJ Daniels from Ole Miss. I think he's the one that's going to slide from safety to corner. Dylan Lawrence from Mississippi State is probably going to be a starting safety this year. Those two guys are guys that they really, really like. Michael Caraway was the top JUCO corner in last year's class. He played a little bit, second team corner last year. He'll probably be a starter this year. Just a lot of new faces that fans are going to have to learn on that side of the ball. But front seven is going to be tough again. It's going to be nasty. I would expect that unit to produce at roughly the same level. I mean, they're going to be gross.
All right. So then, do you think that they're a little bit more aggressive with the front seven, knowing the experience or lack thereof in the secondary, or do they play a little softer up front to maybe help out the secondary, if that makes sense?
I think they're going to remain aggressive. I don't think they'll get away from that. I think that's what they want to do. They have to find another Dominique Q1, who was their sack specialist last year, came out on third downs almost exclusively and did extremely well. They've got to replace that pass rushing presence. But other than that, I think they're going to get after the quarterback. I think they're going to try to be very disruptive. It's what they do. New defensive coordinator, Dan O'Brien. He was a safeties coach last year. He knows the schemes already. He was kind of the coach in waiting for the DC job here at Southern Miss. So they're not going to do much different. That they've already established that. They're not going to change much about how they run their defense. It's still going to be very aggressive. They want to create a lot of disruptions with what they do with that front seven.
All right, one more time out. We'll come back and wrap things up with Scott and talk about how Southern Miss has their own unique fan base. Again, Ole Miss and Mississippi State in there, and it doesn't seem to affect attendance compared to South Alabama, which works around the Iron Bowl. You can see Raging Cajun fans get up and leave to go watch LSU games. Texas State has to deal with that with all those schools in that state. So I find that to be very unique for Southern Miss. Again, special thanks to everybody who has joined recently. The numbers are up exponentially, more than 100 new subscribers in just about a month. Looking forward to still a lot of spring ball left to go. South Alabama just getting underway last week. Marshall just getting underway yesterday. So some are already done, right? Georgia State's not basically, they were done at the beginning of the month, and Marshall's just kicking it off this week. So still lots to do when we got spring football practice. And then don't forget, we got the portal. So and it'll be really interesting to see who is taking guys out of the portal, and maybe just as importantly, who might be going into the portal. All right. So I do appreciate everybody who is subscribing. Please, again, like the video if you see it on Facebook or on Twitter. Share it on Facebook, and it is a big help. And because of you, we're growing. I think the content is better, but I also believe because the numbers continue to grow, more people are seeing it. So I do appreciate it. So thanks very much. All right, let's wrap things up with Scott Watkins talking about the unique Southern Miss fan base. Talk about the fan base there, because it seems to be a little bit different from the Sunbelt teams that I've covered. You can legitimately see when the Cajuns play a 6:00 ball game that if LSU's playing at 8, half the stadium leaves to go watch LSU games. South Alabama will schedule around the Iron Bowl because of Alabama and Auburn. And yet it kind of feels like, I don't know if it's because Southern Miss has been around for so much longer, it kind of feels like they have their own fan base, even though they're in the same state as two SEC football teams.
Yes, Southern Miss most certainly has its own unique fan base. There's not a lot of two-way fans out there in Hattiesburg, and they are very deeply in love with their Golden Eagles. It's a very big fan base, very loud fan base. I think it's one of the best, if not the very best, in the Sun Belt. They get after it. It's great. I love it. A lot of good people to interact with and engage with, and they stick around. When you win here at Southern Miss, it's not like at a lot of other places where even if you win, Louisiana was very good for a few years and couldn't even get halfway
Right.
what was it, a 40,000 capacity stadium, and they can't get
Right.
20K in every other game.
Yeah.
Southern Miss, you look at the basketball team, they just went from being one of the worst teams in the country. They started winning some games, sold out the whole arena. It happens quick here. These fans, they're serious.
Had Jay Ladner on talking about that. He's like, they had a preseason social event where 26 people showed up before the season, and then they had 8,100 in the game against the Cajuns. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you could see it grow. It absolutely gained momentum from 1,000 to 2,000 to 4,000, and they hadn't even cleared 5,000, and they went right to 8,000 for that game. So that's good to see. It's something different than what Texas State deals with, what I'm sure Arkansas State deals with. I think that's very unique to Southern Miss, and it's good to see. Why do you think that is? Is it just because it's in the corner of the state where it's not connected to Starkville or Ole Miss?
I do not know. I couldn't tell you why. I'm sure a lot of fans or some people around Southern Miss that have been there longer, I'm sure they could give you a much better answer. But as you said earlier, it is the school athletically has been, D1, highest level of D1 for a very long time, probably without looking longer than anybody else in the Sun Belt, if I had to guess. So, that plays a factor in it. There's a very rich history in the athletic program at Southern Miss. So I'm sure it plays part of it, but you'll have to ask somebody who knows the history of Southern Miss sports more than me.
All right. What is coming up? How much longer does Southern Miss have with spring ball?
Not much. 3 or 4 practices left. Today's Monday, so I guess 3 practices left. They are about to wrap up. They like to start a little early, not super early, but a little early. So yeah, they're about finished.
So the spring game is this weekend.
There is a second scrimmage this weekend. I don't know if Will Hall likes to do spring games, the traditional spring games. I think he just likes to have another scrimmage.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll be looking for you wrapping up Southern Miss spring practice, and we appreciate your time. Scott Watkins from the Sun Herald on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Always great catching up with you, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me.